Hi all. So today we'll see how to write polyfill for bind method, right? So in previous video, as we have seen how a bind works, right? So this video will focus more on writing the polyfill for it. So let's see first the requirements for writing down the polyfill for bind, right? So the first requirement is the first argument that it needs. Okay, so it needs this argument, so basically the caller of original method. Okay, the rest of the parameter that it needs is comma separated, okay, arguments that is needed by the original function. And what it returns, so it returns a method, okay, which when executed, it should return the result of overall execution, let's say. Okay, basically something like caller dot original function and whatever the arguments that we have passed, it should return the result of this expression. Okay, so for this to write, you must know bind is a instance method of function class. So a function class provides this bind method. See, so we'll create our own bind. Let's call it my bind. Okay, and let's create a function my bind for this. Okay, first what it returns a method, so let's return a method, okay, and do nothing as of now. Now let's define a function get percent. Okay, so I'll write get percent. Okay, fine. So this get percent calculates the percent of student. And how? So it fetches the sum property of that student, the calling student, right? This get percent method will be called by a student. Okay, fine. So it will fetch the sum property and it will divide it by what? The total marks, right? So total marks, let's take it as argument. Okay, this get percent is a generic method, so it can be used across let's say our platform in a way that the total marks is different for different students, as we have in schools, right? So we'll take total marks as argument, but we'll fetch the sum from the calling student, and we'll divide this by, okay, to the sum, and let's also multiply it by 100. Fine, and let's return the percent out of it. So and the structure of the student will look something like this dot name, let's say, oh sorry, there is a name property, let's put it anything, let's have a sum property, let's put 190 out of 300, but that will pass as a argument to the get percent. Okay, now our expectation is something like this: student dot get percent, okay, and it should we should pass 300 as the argument, and it should return a method, let's say Rohit percent. Okay, and whenever we'll execute this function like this, Rohit percent it should return me the percent of this student. Okay, now our expectation is clear. So let's see how many things we want to get hold of. First, bind will be called by a function. Okay, so this bind, for example, what I'm meaning is, you can refer my previous videos for getting more insight on the bind method. So basically any method, let's say here get percent dot bind. So bind will be called like this, and basically by the method of our interest, we are calling that as original function. Okay. So for bind, get percent is the caller, or for bind or inside bind, this will basically be the original function. Okay, got it? So we'll say original function equals this, correct? Now what we want is to call student dot get percent, correct? But student cannot directly call it, so somehow we need to get this, and we basically if you'll see, we pass the caller here. So that's very straightforward. We take argument as caller, correct? Now we want something, again we want something like caller dot original function, exactly like this I have written here, right? So we want caller dot original function. Okay, but since original fn is not a property of caller, it cannot directly call it. Okay, fine. So get percent and dot bind dot call, but we also need this, the other parameters, the comma separated argument that my original function needs. So get percent as of now needs just total marks. Okay, so we'll pass it here as total marks is 300. Cool. We can take here the rest of the arguments is arg1, arg2, arg3, but we have a better way of accepting a known number of parameters, right? We have the rest parameters, so we'll accept the parameters by this args. Okay, cool. Now we have got the caller, we have got a hold of this original function, and we want something like this, right? So now it's pretty easy, because if you remember, we have a similar function as call or apply, which you can use here, and then you can return the result of it. For example, let result equals original function dot call. Now remember, before I'll write further, remember this my bind is not returning the result. My bind is only returning the method, but when this method will be executed, that's when the result is will be returned. Okay, so we'll say original function dot call, and we already know that inside call the first parameter is basically this argument, or the object that will serve as this for original fn. Okay, or we can also call this the caller for the original function, and we already have this hold of caller as we are accepting the parameter in my bind method, right? And for the rest parameters, call needs the comma separated array, so either we do something like this args, okay, for call, or okay, let's go with the call, then I'll also write with apply. Okay, let's log the result, console.log result, and return the result. Cool. Now let's comment this out. So now we have my bind definition. We are binding this with the function prototype so that it will be available for all the functions. Now let's call it. We'll say const get Rohit percent. Yeah, so this will be get percent dot my bind, and what the first parameter will be a caller. So basically we want the student object to be the caller, and for this student the total marks was 300. Okay, and yeah, this returns get Rohit percent, basically a method. So we need to invoke it, get Rohit percent, invoke it just to calculate the percent and return to it. Okay, and let p equals percent, right? Console dot log p. See that I'm printing the result here as well. Okay, so let's run it. Okay, so we got a little problem here. It's not getting okay, we haven't saved the file. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so yeah, see, it's printing the result 63.33%, right? So what we did is we defined our own method, our own implementation of bind method. We called it my bind, and then we assigned this to my bind property of the function prototype, so that it will be available to all other functions. So here we define a get percent as the function which takes the sum from the calling object, and the total marks as its own parameter, and it basically calculates the percent of the sum out of this total marks, and it returns the percent. Okay, and we have a student here that will be basically calling, that we want to call get percent, but it can't actually directly call because get percent is not the immediate child, or anyway it's not a child of student object. So here we are using the mybind for letting the student to call get percent through mybind, but our mybind is just returning a function. So this get Rohit percent is a function which will be invoked to get the result. Now, this is the implementation we did with the call. Let's comment this line, and I'll do this with apply. So original function dot apply. Okay, but the only difference, so first is the caller, but the only difference is that you must already know that the call method needs the comma separated arguments. That's why I need to use the spread operator for this array. But since apply needs an array which will contain the arguments that our original method needs, right? So we'll directly pass args, because that's how apply needs the second argument as. And we should be getting the same results. I'll quickly check it. So yeah, it's giving the same result, right? So yeah, that's how we'll write Polyfill for bind. So just to summarize again, we have our own implementation of bind that should take a caller as the first parameter, and the rest of the parameters that it needs the comma separated arguments that will be needed by the original function, basically the caller of my bind. There is two caller here, one that calls my bind and one that will be calling the original method. So the original method is the caller of my bind, and this caller will be calling the original function. Don't confuse with it. So we get a hold of original function via this, because for this my bind, this is the original function, right? Now it returns a method that when executed, it will return the result of the execution of the original function, because inside this function we are writing how it should be executed, and it's up to you whether you want to write original functions execution via call or apply. And we cannot directly call it again, because of the same reason that this caller does not have its own property as original function. Okay, so yeah, that's the thing, we are returning result. And this line is also very important, as we are binding our own implementation of bind, that is my bind method, with the function prototype, just to make our mybind method available to all other function definitions. I hope that's clear, and see you in the next video. Thank you.